I'm Kathy from Co-op Futures. Thank you everyone for attending. So today's session is turn your idea into a co-op, and we've got 3 speakers that we're going to be having a bit of a chat with about their co-ops, and those 3 people are actually representing 4 different co-ops, so it'll be 4 different co-ops that you get to hear a little bit about. So we're going to be asking people to tell us about their co-ops and why they chose a co-op structure, and then the process of getting it established. And like Karen said, we'll monitor the chat, so feel free to put anything in there. But there's quite a small group of us, so I guess if we want to just have a discussion at the end, we could probably do that way as well. So we'll just we'll get going and just play it by ear, I think. I'll pass over to Jo.
We thought that before we launch into speaking to everybody, we better just explain a little bit about what Co-op Futures is. We were set up in 2000 originally by the Oxford, Swindon and Gloucester Co-op, and we were set up to help people grow and develop and set up cooperatives or community-owned businesses or other forms of mutual, originally across the Oxford, Swindon and Gloucester co-op area. And then obviously Oxford, Swindon and Gloucester grew into mid-counties, and alongside that we grew with them. So our core trading area now really mirrors the mid-counties trading area. And our relationship with mid-counties has always been very strong. For those of you who attend the AGM, every year there is a vote on distributions, and some of that goes towards supporting the cooperative movement, and we are included in that. But our relationship with mid-counties often goes well beyond sort of the financial commitment. It is that we work very closely with mid-counties on a range of different issues across the co-op movement. And we, on occasions like today, where we are given the opportunity to talk to people about the type of work we do, but also to ask for people to spot opportunities where they might see new co-ops coming from, and how we can work together really to grow the movement. So hopefully today will inspire you to think about cooperative opportunities where you live, where you work. So on that, I shall actually hand over to Kathy and Alison. As I said, I'm very pleased to have Alison with us, who has shown her commitment by joining us while she's on her holiday. So over to you.
Thanks. So Alison is going to talk to us today about 2 different co-ops that she's involved with, but we'll start off with Gloucester Energy Co-op. So yeah, thanks again, Alison. Can you just tell us a little bit about your co-op and what it does?
Yes, so we started in 2011, and it's an energy co-op, so it's community-owned renewable energy, and so we've just got 1 project at the moment, although still hoping for more, and that's on solar panels on the roof of the Gloucester Resource Centre, which I think is where Co-operative Futures is based. So those panels are owned by the members of the co-op. It's a community benefit society, and the owners, the shareholders, get interest from the feed-in tariffs that are paid quarterly by the energy company for generating the electricity. So and there's also extra money which comes to the resource centre for the good work that it does for local social enterprises, etc., community groups.
And how many members do you have? How many people invested in that? Do you know?
I think to begin with it was 40. It's about 30 now, because over time, a couple of people have died. and other people want to withdraw their investments, and that's actually how the business model works for an energy co-op. We need to pay people back by the end of the 20-year period, so it's good to have people withdrawing their money gradually over the time.
So where initially did the idea come from? Was it set up specifically to do that particular solar PV installation?
It was set up as a theoretical idea originally, because the feed-in tariff had just come in, and it was pretty generous at that time. So it seemed to be a good business model that would lend itself to community ownership, to cooperatives, to find a renewable energy project, fundraise for installing it by a share issue, and then be able to pay interest on the members' shareholdings through the feed-in tariffs. So yeah, actually there was a forerunner of the Gloucester Community Energy Co-op, which was the Five Valleys Energy Co-op, and they were a group of guys looking for projects, and then some more people, including myself, came along with the same sort of idea, and then there was another energy co-op that already had projects, and I think the resource centre contacted them, hoping for renewable energy on the roof, and they said, we know someone who can do it, and introduced them to us, and that's how it started.
Okay, so from the very beginning, did you know that you wanted it to be a co-op structure, so you were able to issue community shares, or did you consider any other structure at that point?
Well, I think the financial model of this sort of energy co-op does, or did at that time, really depend on community shares. So that sort of led us to Co-operative and the Community Benefit Society. I keep saying in that at that time things have got more difficult now. There isn't feed-in tariffs, and so we have to be more creative about renewable energy projects, and there are other ways of raising money, but certainly community shares is still a really good model, and then it's owned by the members, and they have a say in how the whole thing's run.
Mm-hmm. So when you initially set up the Community Benefit Society, was it quite a straightforward process? How long did it take you? Did you sort of run into any issues during the setup?
We had the help of Co-operative Futures from the beginning. I was trying to think how we got in touch with each other, but I think Joe had heard about it somehow and maybe contacted us. So that was really good advice from the beginning. And then, as I say, there was another energy co-op that was running projects, and the co-op that we joined together with. So with having other co-ops and advisors to talk to, it was quite straightforward. Yeah.
Brilliant. So if there are other people that are thinking about setting up a community energy co-op, are there any bits of advice, any sort of do's and don'ts, or any bit of sort of your experience and insight you would give to them?
Well, apart from what I've said, there are specialist energy co-ops that give advice and help. I'm thinking of Share Energy, for example, so there is quite a lot of help out there, both the generalised cooperative advice from the likes of Co-operative Futures and other energy co-ops, and as I've always found that co-ops are really, well, it's part of the ethos, isn't it, to help other co-ops. So so you can always contact another co-op. But like I said, you do need to be more creative at the moment. So, for example, the project that we're hoping to launch, a share offer coming up, involves social housing in the Stroud area, and that they've currently got storage heaters, so they're not very efficient, not very controllable, and we're hoping to fit air source heat pumps and battery storage and solar PV, so that there's more flexibility and cheaper bills for the tenants, who a lot of them will be in fuel poverty. So it's helping socially as well as environmentally. And but we have to charge for the electricity now, whereas the resource centre got the renewable energy free, basically, as well as having as well as being helped financially. So, but it still helps. You know, it's win-win-win all round. It's cheaper bills for the people in the building, and we can still pay interest to members, and it's renewable energy helping the environment.
So community energy organisations are just having to be a bit more innovative now because the feed-in tariff doesn't exist anymore. So that was quite a sort of straightforward business model that doesn't exist anymore. So you're just having to think outside the box a bit more.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alison. I will leave you to have a glass of water and take a break. I'll pass over to Jo, and then we'll come back to Alison in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks for that, Alison. I'm now going to have a quick chat with Jenny, who's here to talk a bit about her co-op, Bearwood Pantry. So, do you want to just tell us a bit about it?
Yeah. So the Bearwood Pantry, I was just trying to desperately search on our Facebook page to find out when we set up, and I can't actually remember. It feels like a lifetime ago. So what basically happened was there's a group of moms who were dropping off kids at school, talking about the lack of good quality, affordable, ethical food in our high street. We live in Samwell. Fairly typical high street. So I'm getting lots of feedback.
John, could you put it on mute?
I don't see the mute button.
Is it at the top?
You can hover around, hover up.
No, there's no mute button.
I think I can do it. Let me have a look.
It's in the middle.
Right, because if I talk, I can just hear myself talk. That's better. Yeah, so we were just sort of a bit disappointed and disillusioned with the offer that was around for us. And so we started talking about setting up some sort of buying group. And I'd been using a farmer for years since I'd had my kids, who was based in Herefordshire, who himself was part of a sort of informal co-op of farmers. And so I approached him, and he said if we got a few people, he would give us a discount, and we could get these fantastic organic meat products plus dairy, eggs, veg, loads of stuff. And he would deliver to us. But because it was coming direct for him, it would be cutting down on our carbon footprint and the miles and stuff. And it would all be organic and seasonal and exactly what we were trying to get. So we started with just doing that, and there would be a drop off once a week at someone's house, and we just took it in turns to have deliveries at each other's houses. So every time you mentioned it to someone in the area, they were like, "Oh, can we join?" So in the end, we thought, right, having 20 people turn up at your house on a Thursday evening, although it was lovely, was getting a bit ridiculous, because literally our living rooms would be full of meat and sacks of potatoes, and just it was all just getting a bit silly and no room for people. So we got in touch with, originally we were using a church hall, and then we moved to the local library, who offered us a room for free. And we started sort of promoting it to other people in the area. Hello. And we, sorry. And then we found ourselves sort of having just loads of people turn up. So they would join. He set up a little sort of code for people that if they ordered from him, they would say Bearwood Pantry, and they got a discount. And it got into quite a large undertaking. And so we basically set up a shop in the library every Thursday evening. We started buying fruit and veg and stuff from Suma in bulk. And then we would sort of hide it in cupboards in the library until people arrived. And then we'd literally get all our kids involved so that they would sort of sell stuff on the evening to people who hadn't ordered stuff. And so we started to make a little bit of money, so we could buy adding up machines and things, and And so then it was like, well, have we got a business here? Is this something that we could do? So we did somehow, again, I don't quite know how, get involved with Co-op Futures, who gave us loads of brilliant advice. We went on a recce up to Unicorn Grocery, and our dream was, at this point, there were sort of 6 of us who ran things, and then we had about 40 members. At this point, we thought, okay, we'll go and have a look at other places. Have we got a business? Could we set up a shop and a cafe? And we had all these brilliant dreams. And we went through a really rigorous process with Co-op Futures that sort of explained, all the things that we needed to do. And we went right through the process, and we did sort of get to the point of setting up a business, but I think then the reality struck us, and we were like, well, actually, most of us, the women involved, were sort of the main breadwinners for our families, and this wasn't going to be making us enough money that we could be giving up jobs. And so how is it all going to work? And so we had a bit of a reality check, and so we have pared back, and we've stayed for now as an informal co-op, and so we've still got members. The farmer, who we rely for most of our weekly stuff, has got all techie, and we've got a good website now that we can use, and so it's very easy to get people to join. And we've expanded in terms of we don't just rely on that farmer. We have an olive oil supplier in Spain. We still get tin stuff from Suma. We get coffee from a local roaster in Birmingham. And whatever's going, if we can get involved with, for instance, there's the Real Junk Food Project, or Incredible Surplus, I think they're called in Birmingham now, who, if they've got a lot of surplus, they'll contact us and say, do any of your members want, this glut of cucumbers or whatever it is. And we've even, we've set up food festivals, and we've got involved with the local street festival and done all the food offer. We've done work in a women's shelter in Wolverhampton, where we did an art project where we made soup and talked about things. And so it's still going, and I think it will go on forever, because none of us could do without the food that we're getting, because it is really good quality. But just the social stuff as well is really important to us all, and the sort of just having that little message every Thursday, I'll host tonight, and knowing whose house you're going to be popping round to, and have a little chat. And the kids have grown up with it, and it's just sort of kept us all very in touch with sort of what's important, I suppose. So that's where we are now.
Well, you've had quite a journey there, from vast expansion, but it's interesting how you then went back to the core of your idea, and sort of, and I think that's quite interesting that you'd identified what it was, but then actually it grew, but then now you've gone back really to what you'd sent out in the first place. So how did you get to be a co-op? I mean, you've got lots of good ideas around food and all of that sort of thing, but could you have, at that time, did you think of sort of other ways of operating? Was it going to be charitable around sort of nice food, or could it be the Jenny PLC and you'd gone into big business?
Just very natural. For all of us involved, that's the way we wanted to operate. Nobody wanted to be the big boss. We wanted it to be, I suppose, the co-op principles sort of just aligned with our own ethos, and we were very much all realising that we couldn't do it on our own. None of us had the time or energy or knowledge, and what was great about the group that initially formed was that we had someone who had a degree in economics, who was really good with the financial stuff, and I do social media and have done a bit, I could promote it. We had someone who had a lot of experience sort of in the arts and brought a whole sort of a look to it, and we had like crafters, and so we established quite quickly an identity that was it was a whole made up of all of our parts. And actually then when we got new members, what was amazing was that the area that we live in is quite a diverse area, and everyone who joined sort of brought something with them, like some recipes or some skills and just some more stuff. We eventually got in touch with this baker who was from South Africa, and he was a comedian, but he does, he's such an amazing guy, and he's done baking workshops with the group, and we would set up on a night when we were setting up, he'd come down and do South African street food as well, and it all sounds really sort of trendy, but it was very basic and grounded in a very ordinary community, to be honest. We were just, half a dozen normal people. And I just think sometimes, if we had the trust amongst us that we knew that if one of us just wasn't feeling it that week, the others would pick up the slack and do it. Sorry, my dog wants to play with the Monopoly. And so it's just, we didn't even question it, Joe. I think that was it. That was the only way we were going.
Just felt right, really, I suppose. Yeah.
And then also, I suppose we were inspired by Loaf, the community bakery. We'd followed Loaf's story in Birmingham since the beginning, since Tom had set up in his kitchen, and we'd been on to things that he was doing. And I suppose that perhaps that was what sort of sowed the seed. Perhaps that sort of, we were just like, oh, look, that's a really good way of, working. So, yeah.
Okay. So do you think there's anything right at the beginning that the sort of the co-op movement could have done to help you that would actually have sped things along, or actually do you feel you got everything you needed from them at that point? I mean, I suppose you've talked about the relationship with Loaf, and were there other people who perhaps gave you a hand or helped you through things?
Unicorn was amazing. They were so generous with, we had a tour. They gave us loads of advice. I mean, it was one of the deciding factors actually. One of our big problems was always finding property. And with the goodwill of the church halls and the library, it was great, but to sort of carry on and make it into a business, we needed some property. and property's just a nightmare. I mean, most of the stuff around here that is available is owned by some London property sort of, person who has no interest in the community. So we were scouring the streets, just sort of looking at anything that had potential. And to make a go of it, what we really needed was loads of storage space as well as a shop front. And it was just impossible to find a space because, I mean, I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but basically, if you look at the unicorn model, they are able to negotiate cheaper prices because of the amount they can buy in bulk. And so if you want to, get the good prices so that you don't have to mark things up. And, we're in a working class neighbourhood, we couldn't be selling stuff for a fortune, so we wanted to keep prices low. We just couldn't find anywhere. So I suppose really what would be brilliant from the co-op movement is to help with people, help with the property side of it, because that was the real and we just felt like we couldn't negotiate that. If there was some sort of mass negotiating power that Co-ops UK could sort of get into some big property area and sort of get little spaces for co-ops across the country, I'm sure you'd see a boom in co-ops.
Thank you. And always the last question on something like this, is there any bit of advice you'd give to somebody who might be looking at something similar?
I would say if you're feeling like, I mean, what prompted us was just being sick of the supermarkets. I couldn't stand going around the supermarkets anymore. It was just, and I suppose my only bit of advice would be that there are alternatives. There's loads of alternatives out there, and I know COVID has changed a lot, and people are relying a lot on deliveries, and a lot of those deliveries are sort of the big companies still. But I think if you scratch the surface, I mean, a lot of these organisations that we deal with have virtually no marketing skills at all. So you have to go and seek them out. But it didn't take us long to find some little gems of people doing brilliant things. And it is about just talking to people and just trying to find those little things that can help you. And like someone said earlier, a lot of the smaller co-ops will help anyway. So if you can find a smaller co-op that you can get involved with, but just give it a go. I mean, it's easy from where we are now. What we're doing is really easy. It makes my life a lot simpler. I don't have to worry about getting any of my main basics, and I don't have to go to a supermarket.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm now going to hand back to Kathy and Alison.
Just before I talk to Alison again, there was a question that popped up in the chat from Karen for Jenny, just to say, have you seen an increase in customers since lockdown?
What I would say is, we have had a few more people join actually just since lockdown, definitely. And I think usually though a few people were interested just because of the delivery aspect, and it meant that they didn't have to go out. But I think a few people, it's usually people who are just interested in an alternative way of sourcing food that is going to be good for them, and sort of questioning really the how. And I think people are just becoming more conscious in terms of, the green issues and wanting to do things alternatively. I should just say, I do still go to the odd supermarket. It's usually the Co-op on my high street for vegan products for my daughter, but for my son. So
it hasn't caused you and your guys too much more effort or strain with the more people wanting to use your facility, sort of thing?
What we tend to do now is, if someone approaches us and they don't live in sort of the immediate roads, because of the way we work, we take it in turns to go and collect our delivery, the pickups at people's houses. Nobody really wants to walk that far on a cold Thursday evening at 8 o'clock. So we try and keep it really hyper local. But what we say to people is, if you want to do it and you've got a few people in your road, then you can just set up your own, talk to the farmer. We'll give you all the information, share all of our suppliers. And all you have to do, if you find, 6 people on your 3 streets away from you that want to do it, start your own, and you'll have an exact replica, but it'll have your own sort of personal spin on it, really.
Brilliant. Thank you.
So, staying on the theme of food, I'm going to go back to chatting to Alison about another co-op that she's involved with called Food Loose. So, can you just tell us a little bit about it, Alison? What it does?
So this is a zero waste refill shop operating in Cheltenham. I can really relate with a lot of what Jenny said, and just before I forget that last thing about, well, if you live too far away, well, set up your own. This is what I love about cooperatives. It's not competitive. It's by definition cooperative. So yeah. So Food Loose started in a similar way to what Jenny was describing. Just a few women got together and talked about how we can get food that isn't wrapped in plastic or household goods. So yeah, a slightly different focus, but the same sort of process, just conversation amongst friends. And I was aware of a charity, Global Footsteps, which at the time ran a fair trade shop in premises near Cheltenham Centre, and it wasn't doing well. They couldn't get volunteers, so the charity was involved with sustainability and community issues. So it seemed appropriate to ask them if we could run, as a trial, really, a zero waste shop from that premises. So that happened, just run by volunteers, and it worked. And but then over a couple of years, we did have to think about long-term sustainability, and it was more, well, it wasn't appropriate for it to stay under the umbrella of the charity, so it had to set up as a separate entity. So that's where again, where Cooperative Futures and deciding what kind of organisation it should become.
So when did it originally start up under the umbrella of the charity?
That was I think 2018. So it'd been running maybe 18 months before lockdown came, and then it's been difficult since then. But it's on an upward trend again, and now it's been a separate entity just since earlier in the year, really.
So we've talked a little bit about how why you would decide on a co-op structure, and so this is quite a nice example that you started off under a charity umbrella, and then, as you said, recently you've formed as a co-op. So where did that come from? That desire to move it from the charity into its own entity, and why a co-op?
Well, although the charity did have a shop and was trading before Food Loose came along, it couldn't carry on trading as part of the charity. It's sort of called primary purpose trading. Has to be more directly related to the charity. So Foodloose had to set up as a separate business. So that's when we started talking about what kind of business. And I think like Jenny, nobody wanted to for one person either to have the responsibility or to become rich on the being the sole trader or that sort of thing. So we were looking at social enterprise type model, but we needed help from yourself and Co-operative Futures to help us to work out what kind of model to go for. And I must say, I was, having experience with Gloucester Community Energy Co-op and knew a bit about community benefit societies, I was very clear that was the most democratic and cooperative model, and it did seem to fit with running a zero waste shop, so long as we could demonstrate that there was a community. So obviously, because we've been trading for a couple of years, we could easily contact the customers, and they were on board for it to be a community shop, if you like. I'm no longer on the board, so I'm not up to date with exactly how far it's got, but I believe, again, they want to have a community share offer to raise money for equipment and assets, etc. So I think that in this case, it's again a really good way of raising the money, because people who want to become members, become shareholders, they will have a stake in the shop. The money remains theirs, but they can see it's doing good things, and they have they'd be able to have a say in the direction of the co-op as well. So there was an alternative, which would be a community interest company. But that doesn't allow the possibility of community shares, and nor is it as democratic. There would be a board, but the members don't vote for the board. So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And you mentioned there the community share offer that is possibly coming up. So I've been working with Jenny, who is a different Jenny, who is on the board now of Foodloose, and we've been talking about that community share offer to potentially raise some money to move to a different property. So like Jenny that we've got in the room now, Foodloose had some property has been a difficulty for you, shall we say. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and your current premises, and why maybe there's that need to move now?
Yeah, I guess that's another practical reason for separating from the charity, the headquarters of the charity in this shop premises. It's a tall, thin building, and it's not accessible. It hasn't got enough storage space or enough shop area for the kind of trading that Foodloose wants to expand. It's okay for ticking over and managing, but we want to do better, really. So I was really interested in what Jenny said. Wouldn't it be great if Mid-Counties Co-op and Co-operative Futures could help in finding suitable premises, because it really is an issue. There's lots of empty shops in Cheltenham, but the landlords are still expecting premium rents, so it is a problem. Also, some advice, I think, on location, or at least to work out how to work out where the best location would be, a suburban or edge of town, etc. That sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. So you've talked a little bit about there how the wider co-op movement could potentially help you at this stage. Is there anything else that springs to mind from the beginning, from your inception, that the co-op movement did help you with, or maybe could have offered more help with, something that would have helped along the way?
Well, I've always found Co-operative Futures very approachable. You know, you give and also it's very easy to get extra funding from Hive to you know, for extra advice as necessary. So that was really good. I think there's room for improvement in you know, the steps to go through what kind of co-op it could be. It did, you know, there are, like, the first question begs a lot of other questions, I guess, like, do you want to have community shares? Or I can't remember, you know, what your first question was, but the answer is, well, it depends, you know. So I don't know, a bit more. Although there's a lot of information on the internet, maybe perhaps too much. I don't know. I did feel like we were going round in circles for a time.
So that decision process to look at all the different legal structures or types of co-op that you could be, that process was a little overwhelming, perhaps.
Yes, I think so. So even though I knew quite a bit about co-ops and different kinds of co-ops, I didn't realise that the Community Benefit Society was the only one that you could have a community share offer. And so, you know,
yeah.
But I think, having said all that, I think, you know, you two, Joe and Kathy, you know, the knowledge you have between you and all the different kinds of co-ops and eventualities, you know, I think it is really good advice that you give. But yeah.
Brilliant. And so just the final question then for you, Alison, any advice that you would give to someone who's thinking about doing the same sort of thing or setting up something similar?
Well, yes, it is. It is all possible, and same as I said previously. I think there are other community shops out there that are only too happy to give other co-ops advice, and then yourselves, obviously, Co-operative Futures. So just consider the possibilities and ask other people who've done it before.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant, thank you. Just before I hand back to Joe and Jackie, we do have a question from James about how it works for members. They lend money and do they get returns? So I assume this is talking about how the community shares work. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to field that, Alison, or
I can make a start. So with the energy co-op, we can offer interest because there is income either from feed-in tariffs or from people paying for their electricity. With Food Loose, any community shop, I guess potentially there's interest can be offered as well. But I think that's. But it can't be guaranteed. It depends how the business goes, and I think shareholders, members, are encouraged to invest because they believe in the co-op and what it's trying to do, rather than to make money from it. So you might want to say more, Kathy.
Yeah, I think with the community energy company, at least with the feed-in tariffs that used to exist, there was quite a clear model, and you could look at how that finance would be repaid and what interest you could expect. With the feed-in tariffs not existing anymore, and with community share offers in other types of business, it is a little bit more unpredictable. So yeah, it can be a bigger risk for members who are investing. But yeah, like Alison said, it's more community shares are more of an investment of wanting to invest in that community business rather than investing to make, you know, your highest interest possible back. So hopefully that answers your question, James. Brilliant. And so I'll hand back to Jo. Thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you. Now I'm going to talk to Jackie, who's actually in a completely different place to both Jenny and Alison, because she's right at the beginning of her journey, and she really is at that ideas stage. So this is a completely different perspective on really what's happened, what hasn't happened. So Jackie, do you just want to tell us a little bit about what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I work for a charity called Brendan's Bridge, which is a mental health and community charity. So we offer mental health drop-ins and counselling and psychotherapy within community settings. And we've teamed up with GL Communities, which is a community resource in Matson, Prosmead and White City areas of Gloucester. The bit of the background from this is about 10 years ago, this idea started when I was a community nurse in that area. And Sue and I always said, oh, we should do this, and this would be so much better. And from those sort of conversations, it's taken us this long to say, yes, we can actually do this. So what we're hoping to do is to set up a care company as a cooperative for those areas. So residents, we'd be looking and caring for and visiting residents. About 3 years ago, I thought, well, I'm going to do a trial for this. So I asked some students that were training in health and social care at Bridge Training in Gloucester, who lived in the Matson area, and they'd just done their level 2 and actually level 3, if they could help us with some respite for people who were caring for loved ones that had a cognitive impairment or memory problems. Because care companies try really hard and they try and bring the same carers in, but what was missing was this sort of cultural sharing, you know. And then we thought, will it work for someone who's 78 and I'm asking someone who's 19 to go in? And it worked tremendously, because even though they had that huge age gap, the young person was talking about, oh, my gran told me those fields over there used to be, I don't know, farmers, and now they've got flats on, and they would share, because one of the carers actually told me is that it's exhausting to have a lifetime of small talk, and that was what was happening when people were coming in, you know, how's the weather and everything like that, but the outcome of it was, after 6 weeks, the actual clients, I suppose, that are having respite did so well with this young person, and this couple had been really disengaged from the community, but the young person managed to take her to the Redwell Centre, where they had luncheon clubs. So she took her there and she met old friends, and you know, and she started getting better, and everyone was delighted to see her, and they started having visitors again. So that simple sort of test run actually spurred Sue and I on to think, actually, we can do this. And it's become more poignant, hasn't it, since, you know, the government has said, you know, so social care's on its knees. Everyone's scared what's going to happen to them if they become frail and things. And to actually give value and control to a community, to care for community, is really exciting. So we're just at the very beginning planning stages. Jo's dragging us screaming because we don't get the business head bit. We're very much carers and nurses, and we think, oh, you know, everything's lovely, and she's done marvelous with us, because we've had to really turn around our thinking and actually think, well, how can this work as a business, rather than we're going to go in and everyone's going to be really happy and whatever. So yeah, it's a really exciting project.
I mean, I think for you, you're really clear on the challenges and the issues that you're trying to sort of deal with. And as you've already said, social care is in a bit of a pickle. And I think talking to both you and Sue, I think what's interesting is how you've got lots of ideas about integrating care into the wider community activity. Could you just tell us a little bit about that and how you see that sort of working?
I mean, ideally, I mean, this service will be part of sort of care provision, because it's the changes. It's geographical, so, and it can range from mental health walk and talks, and it's like the old adage, isn't it, for the NHS? It's from the cradle to the grave. It's offering a complete holistic service. Sue and I were talking to someone the other day, and it's a bit macabre. I'm really sorry, but they were talking about planning where they want to die, and to have that control just gives people so much peace. So if they were in a cooperative, this actually, as much as possible, I want to stay in this area, and have people around me. So, and I went to a sort of integration group meeting on Monday, and I really think that's the way forward for us, is to become actually recognised as an essential jigsaw piece in the whole care provision.
So you're right at the beginning of the ideas, and as you say, I keep telling you, where's the business coming from? But I guess one of the other conversations that we've had is actually who the members might be. And sort of, do you want to tell us sort of a little bit about your thinking around that? Because, it's a co-op, so the membership is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, the members will be the geographical residents, because the workers or the care staff and the registered manager and all the CQC regulations will come from that area. So it'll be everybody in this geographical area will have a chance to have an input into it, because none of us get through, do we? I think we all sort of access health at some time. We've had a chat to sort of social prescribers, and we're going to have a chat to GPs, but it's essential that it's a whole area, and that's where our staff will come from. The training will be done there, and it's a bit like a capsule, I suppose. Those areas will resource everything.
And how do you see sort of that relationship working? I mean, sometimes, Alison's talked about sort of community benefit societies where it's about the community, but what do you see sort of the strong relationships between the co-op and its potential members might be? We've talked, Alison sort of touched on, people invested in the shop, therefore they want it to succeed. And I think, you've got a much more holistic sort of view on that. How do you think, you might explain that to people in the community that might want them to be members then? That's a really difficult question.
Yeah,
so I do apologise.
It's sort of shared values and having a voice, isn't it? And something which is so important, and actually being listened to, because we're all told, fill in this survey and we'll do so and so, but actually giving people an actual voice and a chance to be steering it, and actually challenging people, saying actually I don't like the way this is done or whatever, and actually allowing people to discuss what alternatives there are, because there's very little alternatives you get in health. I mean, it's all down to cost. If you've got something that the medication might be too expensive, and it's coming out of someone's budget, you might not be offered it and things like that. So it's actually it's everybody. I think that the values and the love for the community, and that's for people living in the community that they love, I think is really important. And they'll have extended family in the community as well. So everyone will have a vested interest into how it goes.
Brilliant, thank you. So you are right at the beginning of all of this. any idea what the co-op movement might be able to do to help you sort of move this along? I mean, as you said at the beginning, you've had this idea for 10 years, and it's hopefully we are now on the verge of seeing something happen. Any thoughts on how the co-op movement might help, might be able to speed the journey? Just to, I don't know, any thoughts?
I mean, what you're doing now, I mean, holding our hand and actually pushing us gently in the right direction and actually being there, you know, and I mean, we had like a storming session where you sort of dragged out of us because we knew what we wanted, but we couldn't put it down on paper. And actually things like that are really, really important because we're so passionate about it. But actually to actually sort of a bit like academic writing, and that's actually putting it down, saying this is how it will work, and this is the demographic figures which we all had. I mean, like I said, being there and it's like it's working alongside us, isn't it? And that's what it is. It's like, I feel it's like a partnership where, you know, you're sort of linking arms with us and thinking, yes, we can do this. Because a couple of times I think this is a really big project and it's quite scary. And then I think, no, we can do this. I mean, one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, I also work for CQC, which is the Care Quality Commission. So it gave us insight as well as what's expected to set this up, and you know, and things like that. So it's really exciting, and I'm excited about people actually having a voice in their own care.
Okay. Anything else you want to sort of, having got this far with your idea, any thoughts on how you might, what advice you might give to somebody who's got an idea 10 years ago, had an idea, and just sort of still right at the beginning of that journey? Any advice for them?
Don't give up. But also there's always someone out there, isn't there, to help you, isn't it? I mean, to keep looking, and you'll find someone, you know, to share skills, advice, you know, and to just keep searching.
Okay. I see in the chat Jenny's put a bit of a question in there. Are there any other co-ops doing what you want to do?
Yes, there's one up north which is quite successful. I mean, and then we sort of emailed and sort of spoken to them via email, and they sort of explained to us it is a sort of a bumpy road because and it sounds a bit sort of controversial, but you're sort of wrestling power away from other people and to saying actually we'll be all right, you know, because it's hard for people to change their mindset, saying, well, we've done this for years, you know, and it's always been done this way, to actually no, we'll be fine, we'll be absolutely fine. And obviously we've got to, you know, people will be coming in, but the demographics of the areas that we're going into, and there's nurses, there's physios, there's all sorts of people living in those areas, so we'll have quite a strong resource of people that I think that can help us.
That's great. Thank you, Jackie. Your voice has held out till the end, so we really appreciate that. I mean, I guess at this point, firstly, many thanks to Jackie, Jenny and Alison. We'd really like to sort of throw it open to people, see if they've got any comments or any thoughts that they want to share with us on what you've heard so far. Any questions from anybody? James.
Yeah, hi. Thanks everyone for sharing. It's really interesting. I'm sort of coming at this from a slightly different direction. I'm act as a virtual finance director, so I'm coming from that sort of angle, finance, and I suppose I've come into this sort of space actually by in fact the employee ownership movement, and started involved in helping businesses sell into employee ownership, and so they've come into this kind of space, which is really interesting. High ethos and values driven companies, which has been really interesting. But also I'm a trustee of a company, a trustee of a charity which before I joined them went down the CIO route. So I'm really interested Interesting. I think it was Alison. You were mentioning it'd be helpful to have a better guide as to comparing the different structures. And for me, that there's a I can picture in my mind. There's a sort of grid where you've got sort of co-op, CIO, maybe other unincorporated. You're smiling, Joe. Maybe there is already exists. But
they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's the problem.
To compare sort of on different axes, and then you look at what can it do for members. So just to understand the different criteria, so that I can sort of place it in my mind, because it's obviously suitable for certain things, and the trust, the charity that I've just become trustee of fairly recently, about a year ago, they obviously made a different decision, which I don't know the background to that. So questions come up in my mind about how are co-ops regulated. I saw there's a brief mention on the website about FSA regulation and stuff like that. So that kind of scares me a bit. Whereas I think maybe the CIO, as I understand it, isn't registered as a company, but it is under the Charity Commission. So we've got the Charity Commission as our sort of oversight. So what about co-ops? What's the oversight for them?
Shall I go for this one then? We could do an entire evening on this one.
Oh, really? Sorry.
Okay, so CIOs were created because originally charities used to be a charity and a company, so they were therefore regulated by two organisations. So the government created the CIO, which is where they now only are regulated by the charities. Co-ops have several structures. So you can be a company limited by share, you can be a company limited by guarantee, at which point obviously the company's house are your regulators. And then you have societies, the Co-operative Society, Community Benefit Society, like mid-counties, and their regulatory body is the Financial Conduct Authority. And that is historical. It's come down through the old building societies and other forms of mutuals, always sat under the Financial Conduct Authority. There is kind of a big campaign there's an ongoing campaign really by Co-ops UK to sort of say, can we not put it under the regulatory authority of the Companies House? Because when company legislation is updated, societies often miss out because they sit under a different regulator. So co-ops can sit in either of those regulatory under either of those regulatory bodies. And what is a co-op is that adoption of values and principles. Really, that is what makes them the co-op, I suppose. And if at some point you'd like, I'd be more than happy to dig out several of my grids of various legal structures and forward them on to you. More than happy to do that. So if you let me have your email at some point, I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. So it sounds like almost if you were to go for a co-op and you were to go for a company limited by guarantee, it could be similar to CIO.
The difference would be obviously the democratic ownership and control. So again, it is that it's difficult because you can have large membership CIOs and small membership CIOs, but the key difference is that issue around ownership. So member ownership, but equally the issue around trading, because charities have restricted abilities to trade, as Alison was talking about with Food Loose. It had to come out from underneath the charity because they couldn't do that type of trading.
Depending on the objects, clause, etc. I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Paul, you've got your hand up, as they say.
Thank you, Joe. 4 very inspiring different stories, I think, tonight, which shows the breadth and width our cooperative movement can work. I've got a question for you, general question. In our village around about 10 years ago, we were involved in a community project, And at that time, when the parish council was putting this together, the only option put forward to the community was a community interest company. Co-operative really wasn't mentioned. So that prompts my question: what's your impression of the general knowledge of what I would call general influencers, being accountants, solicitors, business advisors, and even the government, as towards the merits of the cooperative movement compared to other alternatives? Because what I feel is it's very much undervalued because they're not given the profile it deserves by those type of personnel.
Would anybody like to answer that one? I think that's why we were keen to tease out of Jenny and Alison and Jackie as to how they got to the co-op option, because it isn't very widely out there. Anybody got anything to comment on that? Alison?
Well, just to say, I'm inclined to agree with you, Paul. If it hadn't been that I already knew about Community Benefit Society and was banging on about, well, you know, this is more democratic and owned by the members, then I'm sure it would have, Sweetloose would probably have become a community interest company, which isn't bad, but, you know, it hasn't got that depth of democratic and structure and membership.
So it's a job for everyone to do some lobbying then, isn't it, really?
Jenny, you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know social enterprises are, I mean, I don't know, I've moved around in different jobs over the years and different things, and so I sort of become aware of things as that happens, I suppose. So I know social enterprise, there's a big push with those, and I think if I do have conversations with people about co-ops, it's hard to get past, I suppose, the big co-op on your high street and the bank, and, you know, some of those are sometimes well loved and sometimes not, and it's sort of, you know, people don't necessarily realise that there are all sorts of different co-ops, and most businesses could run as co-ops if they wanted to, and I think that's just a real shame. It really is sad that, you know, there aren't more opportunities, but I think when it happens in an area, there's an area not far from me, Sturtley in Birmingham, where there's, you know, more and more co-ops. They start off with a bakery, and next minute there's a housing co-op, and there's a bike co-op, and that, you know, it sort of builds. So I think we all have to do our bit, really, and just keep pushing.
Thank you, Jenny. John, you wanted to? Don't know whether Karen needs to.
Unmuted. I'm just thinking, I live in Sheffield, and I have had experience of working in a co-op previously, but we have in Sheffield what's called the Co-op Development Group in a huge building, but what they do there never reaches the media. You know, I'm scratching my head really to know. I've been banging on about this for years now, and I just never seem to get any answer. I know people that work there, but it's very hard to get hard information about it. On the other end of the scale, in 2012, I visited Mondragon in the Basque region of Spain to see their huge development, co-op development there, and it was an eye-opener. Various people have said about the different co-op structures. Believe me, it's nothing compared to the comparison between the co-op movement in this country and Mondragon. I don't know if you've heard of Mondragon. It's I think outside China, it's the biggest industrial cooperative in the world, and makes a massive contribution to the Spanish economy. Quite how they've dealt with the last few months, you know, since COVID started, I don't know. I haven't really kept up, but that's always at the back of my mind, because Mondragon was started by a priest, a very devoted priest, during the time of Franco. Now, he must have understood what was going on, but somehow they managed to creep under the radar and establish themselves and grew from nothing into this massive cooperative structure. So I just point that out there. If you want to look it up, it is online. It's just called Mondragon Co-operative.
Thank you, John. As you say, I mean, Mondragon is inspirational.
Absolutely, yeah.
In what it's done. Okay. Does anybody else? Oh, Paul?
Just one question, Joe. Modern technology, crowdfunding and community share issues, are the two compatible?
Okay, you can. Crowdfunding tends to be donations or loans, whereas a community share issue is a purchase of shares. So you are investing in the company in that way. It is possible to run community share issues on the crowdfunder website. So they're not completely incompatible, but they're not always the same thing. So if, for example, you have a look on the crowdfunder website, I'm not sure what's up there at the moment, you will obviously see people saying, fund me to do, fund me to set up my own business. But alongside there, you'll see community businesses saying, come and be a member, buy shares in us. So they are not the same, but not incompatible. I think they live in the same space is how I would describe them.
But it's an avenue that can be explored by prospective co-ops?
Yes, and some co-ops use both crowdfunding and, in their case, cooperative shares. So that they may well do some crowdfunding which would fund the very, very early stages before they're actually ready to offer people shares in the co-op. And then they might move on to offering community shares and membership.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to have any thoughts or contributions? Or Alison?
I can't work out how to put my virtual hand up, but anyway, yes. I just questions about membership, and I'm interested in the difference between Jenny's, the Bearwood Pantry and Food Loose. Presumably, people become members in order to buy food from Bearwood, whereas with a community benefit society, the members are more shareholders. Although I think you can, I mean, shareholders as in investors investing a considerable amount of money or a reasonable amount of money. And I think Food Loose is talking about whether people can become members and maybe get some discount or benefit as a customer, but whether that conflicts with being for the benefit of the whole community, all that sort of issue. If that makes sense, that's not a very coherent question, is it? But
would you like me just to give you a quick answer on that one?
Yeah.
Okay. The model that Food Loose has taken is, as you said, it's a community benefit society, so it exists for the benefit of its members. The other option was a cooperative society, community benefit society exists for the benefit of the community. A cooperative exists for the benefit of its members. So the difference between the two in the sorts of things you're talking about is that a co-op can offer its members a dividend dependent on sort of performance at the end of the year, whereas a community benefit society can't do that. It has to be for the benefit of the community, although both can pay interest on any shares that they have. So there is a slight, certainly for some community benefit societies, there is a tension between encouraging people to be members and wanting to you know, thank them and reward them for that membership, as opposed to existing for the benefit of the community. So there are some sort of challenges there. Does that help?
Yes, yeah, that's what I thought. I wonder whether or not a customer at Foodloose is a member. A loyalty card would conflict with cooperative principles.
Not if it's a loyalty card scheme, but you don't have to be a member to have the loyalty card. So that would be fine.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, it's just coming up for 7:25. So unless anybody else has got any questions, I think I'll hand over to Karen.
No, that's great. Thanks, Jo. James, I don't know if you saw in the chat, I've put my email address there if you want to drop me a line, and then I can forward your stuff on to Jo for you, and then you two can connect. I'd just like to thank everybody that's taken the time to join us this evening. A big thank you to Jo, Kathy, and our guest speakers. I think you'd agree it's been really informative hearing the different co-ops and how they're dealing with it and how they're growing. And Jackie, all the luck in the world with your one. And if that's all, if nobody else has got any questions, I'd just like to thank you all again and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.